Laura Coates is with us. She's a CNN legal analyst, a former federal prosecutor. Our legal analyst, our political contributor, David Gregory, is with us as well. Mark Preston is a CNN senior political analyst, and Margaret Talev is the White House correspondent for Bloomberg. David Gregory, what is your title?
Why can't I be a legal analyst? Why don't you think I can be? No, but I am very close to lawyers.
All right. So you're not our legal analyst. Laura's our legal analyst at this. I want everybody to go through and tell me two things you are especially going to be looking toward in the upcoming Sessions testimony.
Two things I'm looking for, Wolf. One is, does the Attorney General actually assert executive privilege, and how? Is there a letter from the White House counsel? Does he say it himself? Or is it more along the lines of what we heard from Coates and Rogers last week? I'm not comfortable answering that question at this point. How does the committee respond? That's one main thing to look for. And then, look, the questions about this, the reports of the third meeting with Mr. Kislyak, Ambassador Kislyak, are going to be really important on how he handles that.
Well, on the issue of executive privilege, doesn't the president have that responsibility? He has to tell Sessions, in effect, this is executive privilege, don't talk about it.
That's right. And so the question is the White House asserting that privilege at this point? I'm not clear that anyone knows the answer, actually, to how this is going to unfold. It certainly hasn't been sort of previewed, partly because we didn't see a prepared statement released by the Attorney General, as we did with Jim Comey last week, and partly because of this sort of what we saw last week with Coates and Rogers and the questions about whether it will follow in that pattern or not.
They didn't exert executive privilege as far as the Comey testimony last week. We'll see what happens today. Mark, what are you looking at?
Well, specifically, I'm looking at tone and body language from Attorney General Sessions when it comes to, was he aware of any discussions that Robert Mueller has been discussing that he perhaps could be fired or dismissed by President Trump, whether that's from President Trump or anyone else, either within the White House or within the Department of Justice. Also, did he offer to resign? Did he offer his resignation to President Trump that was not accepted? I don't necessarily expect we're going to get answers from Sessions, but that's why I think you really have to look at his tone and his body language when he does answer those.
So I'm interested in the last firing, of Jim Comey, and what counsel the Attorney General offered to the President about firing Jim Comey in light of the fact that he'd recused himself from anything having to do with the Russia investigation. And I'm also interested to know, as a second thing, what actions did he take after Jim Comey said to him, look, you've got to keep the President away from me, from being alone with me? Did he actually take any action as a result of that? I think all of that will be interesting.
Laura, you're our legal analyst. From the legal perspective, what are you looking at?
Well, one of the points that David mentions is so important here. It's what the role of the Attorney General was in the firing of Comey. Remember, it's all been pinned on Rod Rosenstein in terms of the memo that he wrote, and it harkened back to the press conference that Comey held last July in response to the Hillary Clinton email scandal / investigation / matter. And so you have that looming overhead, is figuring out what does recusal actually mean for this AG and going forward. The second part is whether or not the Attorney General was privy or knew about the communications between Donald Trump and FBI Director Comey about Flynn's firing. Remember, Comey signaled that he was aware that Sessions would probably recuse himself before the president knew about it, before we all knew about it. What was the indication that Comey had and the basis for it, and how do we know this information?
I want to remind everyone, Margaret, let's start with you. When Comey testified last week, he was asked about the role that Sessions played when he had that one-on-one meeting with the President of the United States. And he spoke about the behavior that he saw Sessions demonstrate. Listen to this.
I don't remember real clearly. I have a recollection of him just kind of looking at me, and there's a danger here I'm projecting onto him, so this may be a faulty memory, but I kind of got his body language gave me the sense like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, this is a subject that clearly is going to come up in this hearing, the role that Sessions played in those very awkward meetings that Comey had with the president.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I mean, we will see how the Attorney General handles it, but how the Attorney General handles it will be interesting to two groups of people. One, the lawmakers who are on this panel and other panels conducting these investigations and trying to figure out how to support the administration, if you're talking about the Republicans. The second will be Bob Mueller and his group of people who, of course, are conducting arguably a more important investigation, and we'll be able to watch this panel today. So the Attorney General's decision to testify here and not to testify before the Appropriations Committee is interesting, both because of what it will reveal today and also some of the clues that we got from Rod Rosenstein himself earlier today in terms of his unwillingness to answer questions in a public venue that go toward that investigation.
And Laura, remind us of the legal aspects of Sessions invoking executive privilege and telling these senators, whether Democratic senators or Republican senators, I'm not going to answer your question.
Remember, it's one we haven't really seen before, the actual assertion of the privilege in these types of hearings. But the President of the United States has to be the one to actually assert this privilege. Every conversation you have with the President is not covered under a privilege. It has to actually be tied to his constitutional duties. It has to not also be part of a criminal probe, because if it does, it's eviscerated. The privilege doesn't go anywhere from that direction. So if he really does it, it's a political mishap to say that I want to not answer questions, because it makes him probably look all the more complicit in potentially obstruction charges and everything else. And also, legally speaking, to assert the privilege, if you don't actually have a basis for it and there's no federal judge behind it with a lot of teeth to say, I'm going to be able to compel, or you have to avoid being able to compel doing it, it's not going to be very weighty. And so on either front, it'll be a mistake. People want to know the answers to the questions. And also, remember, Lindsey Graham was very hesitant about this entire parallel investigation between what Mueller had and congressional probe. They feared this very thing, that because of the criminal probe, they would be stonewalled for the congressional investigation. So legally speaking, for Robert Mueller, it may be one thing to say, well, it doesn't matter to me what you say in front of them, because I'm going to get my answers. But for Congress, they will not.
All right, David, Mark, Margaret, Laura, guys, thank you very, very much.